Tonight on Primetime Politics, targeting Canadian steel and aluminum.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
Donald Trump launches another salvo against Canada just 1 week after announcing a 30-day pause on punishing tariffs. Coming up, we'll get reaction from Arlene Dickinson, businesswoman, and a member of the Prime Minister's Council on Canada and the U.S. Also,
we will retaliate in kind with matching tariffs on American aluminum and steel.
We respond in kind. That is the type of fight that we have to bring to defend our country.
As political leaders debate the proper response to Trump, we'll speak with Canada's steel producers about the path ahead for them. And how Donald Trump is factoring into the Ontario provincial election. This is Primetime Politics. Hello, everyone. I'm Michael Serapio. Well, it's only been 7 days, but that 30-day reprieve from punishing U.S. tariffs has not bought Canadian industry any peace. And that's because late this afternoon, the U.S. president did follow through on a threat he made last night right before the Super Bowl, imposing a 25% tariff on all non-American steel and aluminum entering the United States, with no exceptions from steel and aluminum made right here in Canada. Now, those two industries make great contributions to Canada's GDP, so these tariffs will hurt very deeply as the industry does contribute to thousands of direct and indirect jobs in this country. It's something that was shared by François Desmarais. He is a vice president with the Canadian Steel Producers Association, who I spoke with earlier.
It's going to be really damaging because we are highly integrated with the U.S. Just to give you an idea, over 50% of all steel production in Canada is sold on the U.S. market. We import 40% of all our imports in Canada comes from the U.S. So the integration of our steel market will make it very complicated and disruptive if we see tariff apply on both sides of the border.
Are there alternate markets for Canadian steel? If not the U.S., can you start selling to another country to make up the difference?
No, unfortunately, going back to my point earlier, the singular biggest challenge the steel industry faces globally is overcapacity. There's simply too much steel in the world, and most markets are saturated with steel, in particular coming from China, and therefore the two only markets available to a steel producer in Canada is the Canadian market and the U.S. market.
Mm-hmm. Can Donald Trump afford to make this move then? You know, you talk about an overcapacity of steel and you talk about how the Canadian economy would be hurt, but I'm also led to believe that the U.S. economy would also be hurt if tariffs are applied to Canadian steel and aluminum. Is that true? Or does the U.S. have a source outside of Canada that they can go to very quickly?
No, actually, currently the U.S., they have measures, either tariffs or non-tariff barrier on any imports of steel going into the U.S., to the exception of Canada, Mexico, maybe not for long. But ultimately, it would damage both sides of the border because, for instance, in our case, we import a lot of our inputs from the U.S. So from U.S. customer, we're importing, we sell to the different U.S. industry, and then we buy back those products as finished goods, such as automotive. So it would have a damaging impact on both sides.
Damaging impact on both sides. So how do you want Ottawa to respond? I guess, you know, when I ask that, there are really two scenarios here. How do you want Ottawa to respond if these tariffs are applied? And second, even if they're not applied, because again, Donald Trump is unpredictable and has proven that he's not bound by any trade agreement.
No, very good question. Unfortunately, it's not our first wishes, but if the U.S. administration moves forward with tariff on our product, we're asking the federal government to retaliate as soon as possible on a dollar-for-dollar base. And then we can look also at further way to improve the situation of the Canadian steel producers to face the situation imposed on us by the U.S.
Are you hopeful that there might be a way to get Donald Trump to you know, if he introduced these tariffs, to walk away from it or get away from it altogether?
No, well, we managed to get them lifted back in 2019, so it's always possible to get them lifted. Of course, if tariffs are imposed on us, we will have to retaliate, and then we're going to have to take measures to protect our own interests. But I think in the long run, we're going to have to negotiate a deal or some sort of agreement between our two countries to lift those tariffs again. And it is our understanding that most likely the same kind of deal of 2019, by a better alignment of our trade policy, will be the solution to the current situation.
Okay. Well, of course, we are watching and waiting. François Desmarais, thank you for this. Appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the federal government has been very clear. It will meet any U.S. tariff with Canadian retaliatory tariffs of its own. And as for the opposition leaders, well, they made their thoughts very clear earlier today.
Canada will never be the 51st state. We are a proud, sovereign, and independent country. We are a patriotic people, and we will defend our future and our independence. Second, he has threatened to bring in tariffs on our steel and aluminum. We will retaliate in kind with matching tariffs on American aluminum and steel, all of the proceeds of which will be given back to our steel and aluminum industry, and any surplus will be given in tax relief for our people.
We should respond with retaliatory tariffs, dollar for dollar. So if it's a 25% tariff on our steel and aluminum, we respond in kind. That is the type of fight that we have to bring to defend our country, to defend our workers. And then on top of that, I want supports in place for the workers impacted. In this case, starting with steel and aluminum, but we need a package in place for all the workers and all the sectors that might be impacted. We can't scramble after workers lose their jobs. And they're saying, well, how am I going to pay my bills? How am I going to support my family? We need that package in place now so it's ready to go if any worker gets hit.
Now, this hit against Canadian steel and aluminum is just the latest hit Canada has experienced from Donald Trump, the U.S. president spreading false information about subsidizing this country, most recently saying it last night as he continues to muse about making Canada the 51st state.
They don't pay their share of military in NATO. They pay very little for military. They're not protected at all. And the reason is they think we're going to protect them. The other thing is we subsidize them to the tune of about $200 billion a year. If we stop doing that, if we stop allowing them to make cars through tariffs and other things, cars, trucks, etc., what they make, they're not viable as a country.
Well, for her thoughts on the situation, we're now joined by Arlene Dickinson, well known to Canadians for her time on the CBC's Dragon Den. She is also managing partner with District Venture Capital and also sits on the Prime Minister's Council on Canada-U.S. Relations. Arlene, Ms. Dickinson, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us.
Always good to see you as well. Thanks for having me on.
Listen, I have to begin with the timing of all this, because here you have Donald Trump once again threatening Canada's steel and aluminum industries. And this comes just 1 week after he said Canada would be getting a 30-day reprieve from any tariff from the United States. I'm wondering what you hope Canadians take out of the timing of this move and the very fact that it comes so closely after a guarantee that it wouldn't happen.
Well, I think if we know nothing else, we know that he likes to create uncertainty and chaos and have people on their back heel or back foot. And so, it's not surprising. It's disappointing. It's very disappointing, but it's not surprising.
Not surprising. So how do we respond to this? Because, you sit on the Prime Minister's Advisory Council. I'm wondering what is being said around the table as to how to meet this moment of a Donald Trump that is so unpredictable for the Canadian economy.
Well, we don't have details yet of exactly what is coming down. So until we have those, I think a response is going to be coming when that happens. But I think it's the same playbook. We have to make sure that we are staying true to what we want and need and what we deserve as a country. And we have to stop the rhetoric that, we are weak without them, that we don't exist without them, that we have no country without them. These things are just detrimental to, and in fact, falsehoods. I mean, I know that they need our resources a lot. So I think it's probably just as much an equally beneficial relationship, more than not.
Okay, that being the case, though, what does this country have to do to Trump-proof itself? Because I don't have to tell you, any threat that comes from the U.S. president does create a chill for Canadian business and a country that's already been struggling with productivity.
Right. Well, I've spoken quite a bit about this. I mean, listen, I believe we need to green light the permits and get the financing and the capital in place to build the pipelines. We have to make sure that the interprovincial trade barriers are removed so that we can immediately help Canadians with money in their pockets in terms of the cost that those create for Canadians. We need to buy Canadian, when that includes perhaps incentives for businesses who are procuring from Canadian organizations, and also for the government to procure from Canadian organizations, remove red tape, get projects underway faster, and then, diversify our trade. There are other countries in the world that want our resources just as much. And so we have to diversify our trade, and we have to do all of these things consecutively, or concurrently, I'm sorry. And so when we do them concurrently, we create the mechanisms by which we can defend ourselves more effectively.
Let me break that up a little bit. And I want to actually first begin with private investment, because, as I said, long before this tariffs, Canada has been struggling with low productivity. You noted in an article that when we look at, for example, employment growth in this country, it's come primarily from the public sector, not the private sector. And without a doubt, in this moment, this country is going to need private investment. So how do you jumpstart that, given the uncertainty that Donald Trump is creating with these types of tariff threats?
Well, the way to get investment in the country is to open up and move some of the regulatory red tape that is in the way of investment. So, these things are all very connected. So taking away those trade barriers interprovincially, making sure that the red tape is there so that projects can get underway in the energy sector. These things all create investment opportunities. But if you're mired in bureaucracy or political issues, and what you don't get is any movement from the investment community. So there will be opportunity in Canada, and I think any good entrepreneur is going to see the opportunity, but they need hurdles taken out of their way in order for them to invest.
You talk about other countries wanting what Canada offers. How would you list out the products, the services that this country can offer other countries that they actually want, that we can take advantage of right now?
Well, I mean, listen, we have, first of all, I want to speak because I invest in the food and health space. Our food products and our food and beverage products are something that the world loves and needs and wants. And so we have, our agricultural sector that provides ingredients, from raw ingredients through to finished goods to the world. We have resources in the form of energy, and that energy needs to get to market. We have minerals, in the form of germanium and uranium and cobalt and all the things that people require in order to make technology work. So there are a lot of resources and raw ingredients from our land, as well as finished products from our land that people in the world need and want, and there are other markets that will buy them.
And forgive me, because I suspect you're tired of being asked the question, but I do need to ask you about Kevin O'Leary and the comments that we're hearing from your former co-star in Dragon's Den. He has been talking a lot on U.S. media. That includes comments he makes on Fox News. I want you to take a listen to what we heard from him recently about Canada and the United States.
But the real opportunity comes out of the chaos and economic union. And I think this is the beginning of that narrative. You got to remember, Alberta has more energy than the entire United States. Right. That's where there's opportunity. That's where the economic union makes sense to investors.
So Kevin O'Leary talking about opportunity out of chaos, talking about economic union with the United States. What's your take on that?
Opportunity for who is the first thing I think about, because there's a lot of self-serving interest going on there with Kevin. But listen, I don't pay a lot of attention to what Kevin says because of that. I mean, he is definitely driven by his own interests. He's definitely trying to do what's right for America, not for Canada. And an economic union is not going to be viable, and it's not a solution that I think is going to work, because it means giving up our sovereignty. If we give up our economic value, if we give up the things that we have in order to appease what Donald Trump is looking for, we lose control over everything that is ours. And that is not, that's not opportunity for Canada. That's opportunity for the U.S.
One more question to you, because going into this conversation, we did play a clip of Donald Trump once again repeating this falsehood that the United States subsidizes Canada. What do you say to that type of argument? Because it does gain traction in the United States to sway the argument about perhaps making this country the 51st state.
Yeah, listen, it's not true. We all know it's not true, but unfortunately, as you're saying, a lot of Americans don't hear the truth. So we have to make sure that we're communicating much more than we are. I think we have to be much more vocal than we are. That's what I'm trying to do, certainly with all of my posts and all of my comments and all of the media I'm doing, is to try to make sure that the truth gets out there. They are not subsidizing us. They need us. In order for him to make America great again, or whatever the phrases that he's using today, the golden age, whatever he's saying today, which is all about creating economic value for the U.S., he needs Canada. And so, you know, like I just think we have to continue to stay strong and continue to realize what we have and the value of what we have. We may be smaller, but we are very mighty in terms of what we offer. And that's what we have to negotiate from, a position of power.
Arlene Dickinson, always appreciate the time. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Well, as Donald Trump continues to threaten Canadian industry, Ontario's election campaign does continue. Two parties paying to air 30-second spots last night during the Canadian broadcast of the Super Bowl. Take a look at what was shared.
When Ottawa descended into chaos, he stood up for us.
Now taking Trump on tonight, Ontario Premier Doug Ford.
The next 4 years won't be easy. There's big decisions ahead, and there's only one leader to protect Ontario. That's Premier Doug Ford.
As Premier, I'll have one priority, fixing our health care. We'll take the money that Ford wastes on bad deals and invest it where it matters, starting with getting you a family doctor. I'm Bonnie Crombie, the new leader of Ontario's Liberals, and I'll get more for you.
So, progressive Conservatives driving home the argument of economic leadership, the Ontario Liberals leaning in on healthcare concerns and government spending. To talk about this, we're now joined by Robert Benzie, Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Rob, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure, Michael.
So, you know, interestingly, a week ago, I was asking whether the tariff pause would take any wind out of Doug Ford sails, but now comes a new threat on steel and aluminum. Is the PC war room breathing a sigh of relief right now?
I mean, I think it feeds into their narrative, certainly, Michael. The justification that Mr. Ford had for the election, which is 15 months early, was that he is best suited to deal with Trump, he feels. Now, that narrative has, with Delta blows we talked about last week, when he was caught on a hot mic saying that he, quote unquote, 100% wanted Trump to win the November election over Kamala Harris. The other ad the Liberals aired during the Super Bowl is actually a video of that gaffe over and over again. So it's interesting, though, that Mr. Ford used a Donald Trump ad last night, and so did Bonnie Crombie's Liberals. So Trump is looming large. And Mr. Ford is actually headed to Washington tomorrow for a couple of days of meetings with U.S. lawmakers. I'm actually going to be down there covering that, so I'm going to be able to see firsthand who he's speaking with and what the message is. And I think it's, as Ford said today and again last night on social media, it's the chaos of Trump that is going to be problematic. And the uncertainty. And so he's trying to say that he needs a mandate that will get him through the Trump years, that he, as he says, to outlive and outlast Trump. And I think the fact that Trump is again talking about tariffs is not bad for the Tories in terms of their framing of this election. However, the fact that Mr. Ford was a closet Trump cheerleader, which surprised a lot of people, it remains a problem for the Tories, but it's probably a smaller problem than the fact that the tariffs seem to be coming, and he is on the vanguard saying these have to be stopped. Yeah, and it must be frustrating, though, for Liberals and New Democrats, because, you know, by the very fact that Ford in Ontario chairs the Council of the Federation right now, by the very fact that he goes into Washington over this issue of Trump, it must be frustrating for the opposition parties, because he will get coverage, like it or not, if you're the opposition. He's going to get a lot of coverage, Michael. I mean, I'm going to be there, the Globe and Mail, CBC, The Sun, lots of media will be there, City News. So, and I think it'll be hard for anyone else to get oxygen. And he's not just going this week, he's going again next week to Washington for the National Governors Association meetings with all of the state leaders at the end of next week, the 20th to the 22nd of February. So he'll spend more time in Washington, D.C. than he will in probably Windsor, Ontario during this campaign. But it's the frame that the Tories wanted, and they believe it will help them. And so far, the polls show that it has been helping them.
Yeah, it shows that they're still leading the polls, the Progressive Conservatives. But, before we get there, Rob, I do want to put this into context, though, because when we talk about steel, that will have a big impact on Ontario if and when these tariffs happen.
Yeah, a huge impact. And remember, Mr. Ford has firsthand experience with this because he was premier when Trump, in his first term, imposed steel tariffs. I was speaking to a manufacturer today, Michael, who was saying that I said, how long before you feel this? And the manufacturer said it's going to be about 60 days, and I'll be able to tell what kind of an impact this has had, because they're also bracing for countermeasures. So whatever Canada comes up with to counter these initial Trump tariffs. And I think the premier, or Premier Ford, made a point last night, and I think it's not wrong in that it's the uncertainty and the chaos. And then this morning he said, look, we don't know if there's going to be these tariffs, if they're going to continue, or if Trump will change his mind again. And I think that's the thing that's going to be so frustrating for all of the other party leaders. They just can't get in on that discussion the same way because they're not in the office right now. They're not part of the Council of the Federation of Premiers. They're not having daily conversations with the Prime Minister. So it is one of the advantages of incumbency. You have the privilege of power and the levers of power.
Yeah, and I think that's also important because you and I are recording this interview, and we've been waiting for the White House to make some decision at some point, but we can't hold our recording ad infinitum. So we're doing it now ahead of knowing what Donald Trump's going to do. But we are expecting an Ontario Party leaders debate next Monday. We know for certain there's going to be a Northern Ontario debate this Friday. How important are those head-to-heads going to be in this campaign, do you think?
You know what, Michael? I think that because it's been such a low-key winter campaign, hasn't gotten a lot of attention. Really, Ford's gaffe on Trump was one of the few moments that was captivating. I know I look at the web traffic for the Stars stories, and I know what people are reading about. And some of the more worthy policy things are not getting the kind of attention that you might hope. But I think when the focus comes down to the leaders on the same stage, where you can see the four of them, Bonnie Crombie, Mike Schreiner, and Marit Stiles, all facing off against Doug Ford on Friday, and then again, this still to be firmed up, but we believe it's on Monday. And it's unbelievable that it's not formally announced yet. That's a chance for Ontarians who haven't been paying close attention, as you and I might, and as viewers of your show probably are, to take a good look at Ms. Stiles and Ms. Crombie, especially because this is their first kick at the can. Both Schreiner and Ford have been leaders in leaders debates before, but Marit Stiles became leader in 2023, and so did Bonnie Crombie became leader 10 months later. So they're both first timers on this stage, but they're both experienced politicians. I'm sure they'll be able to handle themselves.
Yeah, although you talk about Marit Stiles, and I do want to ask one question there, because the NDP in the Ontario legislature were the official opposition at dissolution. Yeah. But when you look at the polls, they're firmly in third place here. How worried is the NDP campaign right now in Ontario?
Well, I mean, the NDP believe that even if they get a lower popular vote tally than the Liberals, they could have more seats. That's what happened last time. The Liberals actually got about 7,000 more votes than them in the 2022 election, but the Liberals only got 8 seats in that election, and the New Democrats got 30. So their vote is very efficient, the NDP vote. So they're confident that they can hold a lot of their seats. They know that they're in tough, and it's hard because Mr. Ford is a different kind of a conservative in the sense that he has really made appeals to areas that have traditionally been NDP strongholds. Windsor, Northern Ontario, like Timmins, they won last time over the longest-serving New Democrat, Gilles Bisson, in the 2022 election, and they believe they can win that seat again. There are very few seats in and around Hamilton and Toronto that the Tories don't believe that they can contest the NDP in a stronger fashion than they had even when they were in power in the 1990s with Mike Harrison and later Ernie Eves. They just feel very good about themselves in those type of blue-orange switching seats. And sometimes the Liberals get squeezed in those plays, right? So it's a very I mean, I know the Tories, ironically, Michael, were happy that the Liberals have candidates in all 120 ridings, because I was speaking to a Tory strategist last week who was saying we could lose X, Y, and Z if the Liberals don't field a candidate there.
Mm-hmm. Because the vote split would be in favor of the progressive Conservatives in Ontario.
The vote split helps the Tories, but the NDP, all the progressive vote would go to the NDP. So they need the Tories need the Liberals to dilute some seats, some votes from the New Democrats in some seats, and then in other seats they need the NDP to siphon away from the Liberals. It's a weird three-dimensional chess in Ontario politics, always has been.
Yeah, but makes it interesting to talk about. Rob Benzie, thank you for this. I always appreciate the time.
My pleasure.
And that is Primetime Politics for this Monday. I'm Michael Serapio. For everyone here at CPAC, thank you for watching. Primetime Politics is back tomorrow. Until then, have a great evening.